Good morning and welcome to Lake Country Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is John Kuhn. I'm a longtime member of this community and I'm your worship leader this week. We welcome you. We know you come here for different reasons, to find community, to seek your spiritual and personal truths, to question, to nurture your heart and soul, to be nurtured, to explore new ideas, to find comfort, and perhaps to find answers to some of your biggest questions. We welcome you. We know you come from different places, different religions, different beliefs, and different backgrounds. We hope you will find comfort, connection, challenge, and love here. We hope you will find ways to provide outreach to others in our congregation and in our local community and world community.
Today in UU congregations all over the world, people will gather in an effort to live into, as best as we can, what we profess about placing love at the center of all that we do. What a magnificent challenge. We are currently living in times baiting us not to love. The social and political atmosphere in which we travel insidiously tempts us to find fault, to place blame, and to point fingers, and increase that which can tear us apart. And yet we practice a faith, often imperfectly, because after all, we are human. But we continue to practice a faith where we are called to answer the question, what is the most loving thing I can do right now? What an astounding challenge. What an unbelievably vital attempt. What an incredibly needed beacon for the future of us all. So we gather today to support each other in living this mission. May the light of our flaming chalice breathe life and love into every one of our congregations and into those who, by their very nature of this calling, have the great and wonderful opportunity to live and to love in these days filled with so many struggles and yet with so much possibility. May it be so. The year is 3757. The empire's control of the planet has become complete. The world has officially been split into two groups, the haves and the have-nots. Those haves represent a tiny minority of the population, but this top 1% controls everything. They have amassed the mightiest military the world has ever known. These wealthy landowners allow the peasants to farm the land, but then levy taxes on them so heavy that there is no such thing as anything beyond subsistence farming. Dissidence is quelled quickly and with a heavy fist. Around this time, a child is born. She grows up just like the rest of the peasants, but it's clear from early on that this child is different. By the time they're in their early 30s, there are crowds of peasants following them everywhere they go. They have become a prophet, and their message is love. That message is so pure and powerful that many believe they must have been sent from God above to save them from their misery. And the empire recognizes the sway that they are having over the peasants, and so they are put to death. 50 years later, people from the many different tribes that followed that prophet still believe the message that they shared might just be their path to salvation. And they are still trying to implement their teachings. So then another prophet comes along and tries to organize the followers of this original prophet's teaching into a more cohesive movement. He travels around the world trying to get all these disparate tribes to align around a single story to ensure that the teachings of this prophet are being implemented as intended and with consistency. He wrote a series of letters to the different tribes, trying to help them all develop a shared understanding of what that prophet was trying to help them see. Now, by this point, you've probably figured out that this isn't some future fantasy. 3757, believe it or not, was the approximate year in the Jewish calendar that the prophet Jesus was born. And it was Paul that was writing these letters to the disparate tribes some 50 years after his death. One of the most powerful letters he ever wrote, and this is one of the few things that many of the historians believe was actually penned by the person it's given credit to. One of the most powerful letters he ever wrote was to the Corinthians, and you may have heard it. It goes something like this. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no records of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in the truth. It always protects, it always trusts, it always hopes, and it always perseveres. Love never fails. How is it that most everyone in this room is familiar with this letter written by some dude 2,000 years ago? Well, I'll tell you, it's because about 250 years after it was written, the movement that prophet Jesus had spawned and the revolutionary Paul had worked to amplify had become so powerful that the empire realized that it was actually losing control of the peasants. So it did what all colonial powers do. It co-opted the message of the peasants and made it the official religion of the state and the church. That empire, of course, was Rome, and that religion became Roman Catholicism, the official law of the land for almost 1,500 years, until the Protestant Revolution, a time when the peasants finally began to have access to the words that the Roman Catholic priests had been sharing, and a bunch of folks said, I don't think this means what you think it means. Different groups began to split off from that colonialist religion. Many of the early adopters of these new ways were put to death for speaking such heresy. Two of those groups were the Unitarians and the Universalists. The Unitarians were most like the original Jewish teachers, learned, logic-driven debaters who questioned so much that they eventually took the whole idea of God almost completely out of their religion. Another was the Universalists, who looked at the words that had been handed down and said, none of that death and eternal damnation makes sense coming from an all-knowing, all-powerful God. The most powerful truth, the only thing that makes sense, just like that guy Jesus said, is love. 60 years ago, these two disparate tribes joined forces, realizing they had a great deal in common, but that their numbers were small. Over the first few decades, the larger logical arguers of the Unitarian tribes sort of took over this new faith tradition. But it was a faith that had adopted the concepts of democracy, and the Universalist voices would not be silenced. The people that had found this quirky religion were looking for something different, something real that brought them together and taught them how to live together in peace. The ideals being espoused in this new church made sense to them, but more and more of the folks that were showing up kept expressing that they were looking for something even deeper. And then in 2023, at their annual gathering, after a half decade of research and discussion and debate, this little faith tradition collectively decided to place love at the very center of their belief system. So the followers then began to try to understand what this meant, and as many of the concepts they had become used to were similar to what their chosen leaders had been preaching before, but they were also slightly different. And love at the center? Many of the logical Unitarians balked at this idea. What is love anyway? An emotion? We've got a government running headlong towards fascism. The gap between the haves and the have-nots is wider than it has ever been, and the world is on fire. How can we possibly place our faith in a squishy word like love? Because, dear ones, as the Roman Empire learned, and this empire almost learned in the 60s, Love is the most powerful human emotion there is. Paul's words exist today because a message of love very nearly toppled the most powerful empire in history. And a nonviolent movement based in love drew enough support in the 60s to almost completely transform the empire we are currently living within. The power of love was brought to bear on unjust laws that marginalized women and minorities and led to changes that had never before been seen to attempt the playing field for all. Which brings us to today. What we are seeing today is a long brewing resistance by those who held complete power before. As Frederick Douglass reminded us, power concedes nothing without demand. It never did, and it never will. What we are experiencing today is the backlash against a recent movement grounded in love. A movement that began 2,000 years ago and continues today. A movement that has been so conscripted and distorted and dispersed that in some ways it has lost almost all of its power. And a message that I believe needs to be remembered and practiced and strengthened once again. Because the work is clearly not done. The early Christians, if you look at history, weren't actually concerned with an afterlife in the sky. They were trying to return earth to the image that was portrayed in the picture of the Garden of Eden. They believed Christ's message of love was the path to creating heaven right here on earth, not in some long imagined sky happy place. And they almost succeeded back then. And we almost succeeded again in the 60s. We may still succeed. The story continues today. Here in this community, and in thousands of small communities just like this around the country. Some that are Unitarian Universalist, and some that are of other faith traditions. The Dalai Lama is doing the same exact work we're trying to talk about. This is the first Sunday of our new church year, and we begin again in love. You've heard me say it before, and I'm sure you'll hear me say it again before you run me out of town. A community like this is designed to be a practice space for human relationships. A community such as this one, guided by a sense of intentional principles and values, compels us to try to become the best versions of our imperfect human selves that we possibly can be. Done right, this is a space where we can learn to heal our deep emotional scars. Done right, this can be a space where the next generation learns how to be kind, thoughtful, caring citizens. That's your goal. We're trying to help that. Awesome. Done right, this can be a space where people learn the skills to create healthy, peaceful homes. Done right, this can be a space where the seeds can be planted that eventually blossom to become the next Garden of Eden. And done right, a space like this can become one of the sources of a hoped-for heaven on earth that our ancestors, and occasionally ourselves, continue to believe may someday be possible. The work of bringing the light of love into our hearts until it burns so brightly that it is seen by our neighbors and attracts their curiosity is the work I hope to see this community engage in the coming year. There is so much work to do, let's be real. A love that is powerful enough to strengthen our resolve, enough to topple an empire and stand up to greedy corporate interests, is not a watered-down, saccharine-flavored love. No, the kind of love that is needed in the world today is deep and profound and experienced. It is not understood with the head, but it is felt with the heart. And once it is felt, its power cannot be denied. We are beginning again in love. As the summer winds down, I will be inviting members of this community to enroll in a series of new classes. These classes are designed to help us find for ourselves the potential power that is available within this faith, if only it is actually practiced as a faith. The work begins today. I know that many pull back from the summer. There's more people here than you bet we're going to be here. You said 32. I think there's like 50 or 60. We will be splitting our time with some of the other local congregations, hopefully developing some new relationships. But I also know that some folks stop coming to church altogether in the summertime. I get it. It's warm in here. There are many different events calling for our intentions. So given that reality, today I'm simply going to invite you to consider the adoption of a simple spiritual practice to attempt to implement until we are ready to really crank things back up again in the fall. Many folks have come to falsely believe that Unitarian Universalism is not a real religion and that you can believe whatever you want. Neither of these is actually true, but they become true if you don't take your chosen faith seriously. This faith, if lived with intention, has the potential to transform lives and heal our broken world. So if you're ready to draw some more strength in this faith, I hope you'll choose to join me in this invitational practice. We have collectively transformed our beloved 7 principles into 6 values with love at the center. You can see the banner on in the foyer outside there. My invitation to you, whether you choose to keep coming to church each Sunday over the hot summer or not, is to begin to do the work to bring these values that we profess to hold to life even more fully in your lives through an intentional practice of reflection. There are 6 values plus love for a total of 7, exactly the same number of days in a week. And if you're like me and nothing happens if it's not on your calendar, I'd invite you to take out your phone right now because you know it's in your pocket. You know it's there. Take out your phone. It's okay. It's okay. We're going to do this. This is the only way things happen. I hear stuff. I go to churches. I hear stuff. And like 2 days later, what'd they say? I don't know. I have no idea. It felt good, right? So I want you to pull out your calendars. You don't have to do this. It's invitational. Pull out your calendars and create a new event. And title it Love Practice. Set it for first thing in the morning or set the time right before bed. If you really want to go all in, create 2 different events, one in the morning and one in the evening. And then click that little button that helps it repeat every day. And then click the little button that adds you a little reminder so you don't forget. And once you leave here, go to the UUA website, uua.org, easy to remember, and look up the value statements that are a part of Article 2. And that little bit about love that are in the bylaws. And copy each one of those into a new reminder so that you get a different daily reminder 6 days in a row and then have one for love. And then tomorrow morning when that first reminder appears, look at that value that you selected for the first day and ponder this question. How will I work to expand love in the world today through my professed value of, let's say, generosity? The generosity value says we covenant to freely and compassionately share our faith, presence, and resources. When that reminder comes up, how will you imagine challenging yourself to freely and compassionately share your faith or your presence or your resources? If you set a reminder at the end of the day, simply reverse it, look back. Phrase the intention as a question. How did I work to expand love in the world through that professed value of generosity? Maybe on the 7th day, copy and paste Paul's letter to the Corinthians. I can't think of a better intention about how to bring love to life in the world. And reflect upon one line or one invitation from Paul's letter to the Corinthians. I don't think there is a more powerful set of guidelines towards expanding love in the world. It has been, and it always will be, kind of easy to come here on a Sunday, listen to some words, try to do some good in the world, and feel like we're being good Unitarian Universalists. But at this moment in history, the world doesn't need good Unitarian Universalists. It needs powerful, inspired, brave Unitarian Universalists actively working to put their values in action towards the healing, the injustices that exist and are gaining more and more power each day in the world. I do hope you will join me in trying out this new practice. I heard it at General Assembly, and I've set the reminders for myself to begin this day as we begin this new year. I hope you'll join me. I'll be back in a few weeks. I'd love to hear how it's going. I hope you will recommit to this faith which you have found, which you have been perhaps hoping would give you more, but maybe up to this point has perhaps lacked a little bit of depth of feeling. Because if I strengthen the practice of my faith, and you strengthen yours, and all of our UU siblings around the country commit to strengthening theirs, there is no power on earth that will be able to resist the vision shared by that lowly prophet almost 2,000 years ago. It's a new dawn. It's a new day. It's a new church year. We begin again in love. President Barack Obama once said, "Change will not come if we wait for some other person or for some other time. We are the ones that we have been waiting for. We are the change we seek." Let us go forth from here into this day and into this new church year, holding the intentions that have been shared today close to our hearts. Friends, I have one little more story to tell you before we get out today. I was walking in from my garden yesterday, and there was a dove perched right in the middle of my hood. Now, I'm kind of a heady person, and I think there's a lot of people that would look at that and say, that's some kind of sign. You should pay attention to that. And my first instinct was more like the old man instinct, like, get off my lawn, don't poop on my truck. But I took a picture of it, and it's kind of beautiful. There's this beautiful little dove just sitting on the hood of my truck, which maybe is supposed to be a message to me about spreading peace. And then I came out this morning, and that same dove was sitting on the roof of my truck. And it stayed there as I walked up to it, and I looked at it, and it looked at me, and it didn't move. And then I went to get on my car, and it flew away. Now, maybe you believe in signs, maybe you don't believe in signs, but I've learned that when you begin to really try to implement spiritual practices in your life, you get more and more of these signs that just come. And you can attribute them to what you will, but I'm going to take it to say that I'm being called to try to spread more peace in this world. So I spread that to you. Go forth and do the same. Blessed be.